Hello everyone. Just want to do a quick video. Yeah, I messed around with Docker in the last video with the old llama and my AI models there. So I just wanted to go over like what is Docker and Docker Compose and how you can create Docker Compose containers of your own. I'll do something basic for this one, but yeah, you can go as complex as you want. So Docker is a tool to create ephemeral containers, which I'll go over this aspect later. But it doesn't expose your host file system. It can have its own networks. It can mimic other Linux distributions if you're running Docker on Linux. Uh, so I'll post a link in the description how you can find instructions for your Linux distro to get Docker installed, the latest and greatest version. So it should match what I got here for a little bit of a lab I'll do, and you can follow along when I get to that. Docker Compose utilizes Docker but allows you to specify it in a file instead of using a command. The reason why you would want to do that if you're doing a service stack where you have services depending on other services is much easier to do it in a Docker Compose stack. Um, and comparing it to VMs, not as much overhead with Docker. So Docker makes sense if you are running a service that can share your operating system kernel, and virtual machines make more sense if you have to do more cross-platform. Let's say you have a service that's only available for Windows and your host is running Linux. And you can't switch your host to Windows because other services you have are running on the Linux. So it makes much more sense to put a virtual machine platform on that host, and then you can run virtual machines on it. So versus other containerized software platforms, those platforms like Snap and Flatpak and AppImage typically gives more access to the host file system. So this is helpful if you're running like Office software or something like that, where you want that sort of access, but not so much when you're running like a service that you want to keep completely separate from other services on the machine. So first things first, we're going to get into a terminal. You want to create a folder. I usually go either in base level or I make a Docker folder in the /var folder. Um, then typically for each stack, you'll create a separate folder underneath your primary. And I just created one called YT-video for the YouTube video. And then you will want to create a Docker Compose file. I'm going to use NeoVim. You can use Nano, you can use gedit, you can use Visual Studio Code. It doesn't really matter. I'll just go over what you have to put in the file for it. So a Docker Compose YAML file is in the YAML config language, so it goes something like so for a section you can do the section name, which would be services for Docker. Uh, and when you press enter, your text editor should indent for you. And the name of the service that's going to be used for other containers within the service stack. So this will be the DB container. It's going to run the MariaDB image. So this part specifies the image. If it's not base level on the Docker hub, uh, you have to put username slash then the image name. But because MariaDB is right on the root of Docker Hub, you can just put MariaDB. Then we're going to use the LTS tag. So this colon on the LTS part, that's for the tag. So you can have different versions of each image on Docker Hub, and you can specify which one you want to run using the tag at the end. Then we'll give it a container name. This is for reference outside of the stack. Then we will After that, we'll specify the restart policy. So this is just telling it to restart the container unless it's stopped by the user. Then environment. So this is where you'd specify your environment variables. Then variable name. And the content variable. And we'll create one for adminer, which is essentially a lighter weight version of PHP my admin essentially. And that is the adminer image. And we don't necessarily have to specify environment variables for this one, because by default it does use DB, so this should be fine. That's why I did name that DB within the stack. But you do have to specify port, so we can do ports. So essentially, if you're familiar with port forwarding, where you make a port available on different levels, so essentially what we're doing with the port sections, we're making these ports available to the host. So you can, I think this runs on 8080. And you can also do like an IP address too, so we can specify the localhost IP, and we can tell it to with 2 colons that this is the IP that will be available at, and these are the ports. So essentially with that, we'll save and close, so escape, then holding down shift and pressing Z twice. Then that should save, and then we can do docker compose up-d. And in the web browser, we can open localhost, and that's adminer, so we can do root, and that's our password. And let's create a database, and save. So that's our database. So like if for some reason you just wanted to take it down, like you just wanted to remove it, you're done testing your software or whatnot, you can do docker compose down, and that removes everything. So then when you do docker compose up-d, we can go back to the localhost 8080, and you'll see that database we created is no longer there. This is the ephemeral nature of Docker, so because we removed everything using the docker compose down command, that it won't actually save that information. So to be able to save the information you want to, you have to specify something called volumes. So we'll stop it for now. Open the file back up. So the database is the one that we'll want to save the files. So how do we do that? We specify a volume section for it. And for each volume, we'll do a dash because it lists like the ports are. And you have to do in relation to the host, so we actually do want to store it in the same folder. And the reason why I personally like to do that uh, is because then that way I can just back up the whole folder and getting the information that I need along with the Docker Compose file. You can just do volume name and where it is on the guest. Then you can go down here and do volumes, and you can do like names. So and you can do like name too, and you can use those up here. But that kind of stashes them away in Docker's own storage. But I don't like to do that because it makes it harder to back up. So we'll do DB data, then MariaDB saves it in /var/lib/MySQL. And that'll save it when we create new databases and stuff. So now we can do docker compose up-d. And now if I create a database, and we'll do privileges, we'll create user, then give it all privileges to WordPress. So then we can double check that. Yep, it has all privileges to WordPress there. So now if we do Docker, easier to do that, Docker compose down again. So as you can see, it's no longer up. And then Docker compose up-d to recreate it. We'll log back in. This WordPress database is still there along with the user. So that's how you get your Docker containers to save information. You just got to figure out where it's trying to save the information in the container, and just pass that onto the root using your volumes. So now that we got some background services, we got a way to admin databases, stuff like that. Now we want to host a service. How do we do that? So we can open the file back up. Then we'll just specify another service. That's the awesome thing about Compose service stacks is you can just add services. So I'm just mimicking what I have currently for this. An environment. Then we can do the environment variables are like WordPress, DB, and host. We can do DB, WordPress, DB, user. That would be WordPress, WordPress, DB password. That would be password because that's what I put in when I created the database username and password there. And then we'll do WordPress, DB, then name, and that will also be WordPress. Then we also have to do ports for WordPress so we can access it. In production, you would do a reverse proxy or some way of doing SSL encryption, but for now, we'll just specify that we'll use 8081 on the host side, and then it's port 80 on the guest side. Then we'll save that, Shift ZZ, and we'll do Docker compose up dash D. Now we can go localhost 8081. Then this is a WordPress setup. Or actually, I forgot something. So we will you can tell I do these candid. I don't really do them scripted. I think it's best for people to see this kind of live troubleshooting during it. So we do have to specify volumes as well. It typically doesn't matter what order you go in for the different sections. So same thing, specify host side. So we'll do WP data for WordPress data, and then I think it's /var/www/html. And yep. So we got that. That's one way to check if you got right. So okay, now we can go localhost then 8081 WordPress app language. Yeah, why not? Um, Confirm use of weak password. So now we have a working WordPress. And add new posts. So that's this new WordPress page that I just created using Docker container. So the fun thing is, since I have the volume set up, we can just, for some reason, if I have to do an update or something like that, bring things down, do another Docker compose pull, that'll pull all your images. So if there's any new updates, it'll update set images. Then Docker compose up dash D, they'll relaunch everything. And because we did those volumes, the data that we need is now persistent. So now if I do go back to that, there's that negative post. So that's essentially Docker and Docker Compose in a nutshell, with a little bit of a lab where you can practice the simple paradigms of Docker Compose at least. So I might continue the series. Maybe I can show how to use a .env file, that fun stuff. So maybe I'll see you in the next one.